We're gathered here to join in the journey. Our journey contains both sorrow and gladness, joy and tribulation, peaceful times and times of discontent. These walls have seen hundreds of years of this kind of gathering. We share with all our ancestors the drive to find deeper meaning in what is and greater hope in what can be, no matter how dark the glass we may be looking through at the moment. So now, I invite everyone to breathe. Breathe deeply, come into this sanctuary, be present, be focused, be at peace. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and seek communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Imagine that one Saturday morning, you're sitting at home, and the doorbell rings, and at the door are two nicely dressed people with Bibles in their hands. And you say, "Good morning," and they say, "Good morning. We have an important message for you. Unitarian-Universalism, we hear you one of those. It's a tool of the devil, and you're going to hell if you don't repent. But we love you, and we don't want to see you go to hell. So please join us." Well, first you might kick yourself for not looking out the side window, see who was there before you entered the door. But if you remember your universalist theology, you might say, "So you believe in a just God who prescribes infinite punishment for a finite life of sin." And you know, of course, that hell is actually a Greco-Roman concept that was unknown to Jews up until that time. That's if you're being nice. And I suspect if you're in a bad mood that morning, you might well say, "Oh, I'm going to hell, huh? Well, see you there," and slam the door. My talk this morning is about being effective at the kind of civil persuasion that's at the heart of a democratic society. Now, those nice people at the door who have courage, how effective have they been at trying to persuade you to convert to whatever their particular theology is? Not very, right? And that's the heart of things, I might say. I get a lot, you get a lot of videos from friends, forwards from Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, And what I see in those, whether they're coming from liberal or conservative, are not conducive to constructive dialogue. They're designed to motivate you to dismiss the other side entirely. They're Marxist. They're a basket of deplorables. They're lazy bums. They're greedy capitalists. They're Antifa rioters. They're Klansmen. It's so much easier to shout the other side down, not to let them make their case, come up with alternative facts, and maybe take some little comment someone maybe made decades ago to disparage your opponent, instead of addressing the actual policies and ideas of the other side. Now, this came from political consultants, basically. They know that most people don't spend time on politics. They're not that interested. So they can frame everything as an existential battle, good versus evil, do or die, and that'll get the public's attention. Unitarian Universalists believe in the democratic process as part of our faith. And in this election, the democratic process itself is in danger. And this process will not work if we disparage the other side as idiots, fools, or brainwashed. For whatever reason, whether it's life experience or they've been in some particular ideological bubble, they have real concerns. They may not be able to explain or define them the way you would, but your best strategy isn't to undermine their flawed arguments and understandings,
but to try to understand the heart of the matter that motivates them to do what they're doing. People are driven by so many different factors instead of a 30-second campaign commercial. There's all these different things. You know, exaggeration, misinformation, taking things out of context, looking at what other people do in the least charitable way. That would make a good sermon, actually. But those are the enemies of democracy. A healthy political process tries to put things into context, with each side presenting the truth as best that they can. Now, I write my sermons out in advance to avoid going off on some rant and talking off the top of my head and maybe misquote or use hearsay, you know, bend the truth a little bit to make some point. I try to fact check, research, I read multiple sources, and I wish all our candidates for office would do the same. Now, I'm not being Pollyanna about this. I admit, it isn't easy for me to look at people or ideas I deeply disagree with charitably when the temptation is to rail like an Old Testament prophet against their so-called evil. Now, we also understand politics by nature is a rough game. Elections are what we have instead of constant civil wars. We argue about things, what the society ought to do or not do, raise taxes, lower taxes, build more housing, save more land from being developed, decide what energy sources we should use, whether we should sell armaments to other countries at war. And the Constitution, as was built up in the 18th century, is based on the ideals of the Enlightenment. And those 18th century philosophers believed that the best answers to these kind of policy questions would be found by an informed electorate responsibly investigating and trying to persuade others of the best course to take. They were looking for debate, rational argument, probing for facts, learning from experience and history. That is how a democratic republic is supposed to function. But because of the internet and the way our culture has evolved, it's so much easier to say that if the other guys are elected, it's going to bring hell on earth. Both sides are basically saying that. From conservatives, you might hear that you can't be a Christian and vote for a Democrat. Liberals raise the alarm that a looming Christian nationalism will turn our country into a theocracy, sort of flying in the face of the fact that right now we're the most secular society we've ever been. Republicans will stoke fears that liberals are trying to turn our public schools into ultra-woke bisexual education camps. And when I hear, I'm sort of wondering, gee, why did they think that would be so more effectively taught than we're doing with math and reading? You know. But I will say, one of the things that turns me off the most is hearing each side taking cheap shots at each other. And the example I like to use is from J.D. Vance. So someone on the internet made a page purporting to be from his book, Hillbilly Elegy, and it was a page that basically involved an unnatural act with a couch. It was a lie. It was, the person who posted it said it was a lie, but it was a good joke, and so it spread. And I'd like to quote Washington Post columnist Aaron Blake. He wrote, "One of the biggest dilemmas in politics is how much to avail yourself of the dark arts. You might think that a tactic is totally wrong or underhanded, but what happens when you see your opponent getting some traction with such things? Do you emulate them even halfway in the name of leveling the playing field and defeating someone you believe is dangerous? If they tell blatant lies, do you feel justified in stretching your truth? Do you conclude that failing to stretch the truth amounts to unilaterally disarming?" And he goes on to say, "The Democratic Party has struggled with this throughout the Donald Trump era because of lies and falsehoods and conspiracy theories and epithets aplenty. And a well-known speaker once said, 'When they go low, we go high.' And another speaker said, "You can't be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. You can be civil, but you can't overcome what they intend to do unless you win elections." So that's the thing we're dealing with here. The low road or the high road, victory at any price or defeat. He goes on to write, "Now there's no comparison between the liberties one side has taken in his political career and what the other side is doing. One side called Barack Obama the founder of ISIS, promoted all the birther nonsense, made racist comments about diverse opponents, and he accused his opponents of criminality on nonsensical and contradictory evidence. The former president would take stuff like the couch story, and instead of joking about it, he would pitch it as fact. Now, there's a cost to the political process in going down this road. History suggests that plenty of people who don't care to check the story out will come to believe that it's real. So, is this where we are as a country right now? Is it okay to lie because the other side does it too? Do we want to reduce our political debate to the terms of a middle school cafeteria? Now, Michelle Obama said this about the criticism that her "we go high" mantra was naive. And Michelle said, "Going high is the only thing that works, because when we go low, when we use the same tactics of degrading and dehumanizing others, we just become part of the ugly noise that's drowning out everything else. We degrade ourselves, we degrade the very causes for which we fight." I know, this congregation is not a political organization. I want to make that clear. But we get involved with politics because we're deeply concerned with social justice. We want to use the power of our Commonwealth to improve the welfare of people here and now in this world, not in some heavenly afterlife. But we have to remember, we're not just liberals by and large, although conservatives are welcome. We're religious liberals. And that's what makes us different. UU ideals call us to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, even if it's somebody wearing a red MAGA hat. And we need to keep ourselves from sliding down into the muck that society has prepared for us, trying to entice us to throw away our ideals and become angry and bitter, and not just disagree with, but to despise people who disagree with us. Now, if there's a conspiracy to undermine democracy, this is the tactic they would use. Foment political hatred and turn a nation against itself. You wouldn't need to gather military forces and invade the United States. Just use social media until the democracy is so divided that it consumes itself. Speaking of democracy, we had a convention. Unitarian-Universalists have an annual General Assembly, and we vote on things. And we had something called the 7 Principles. You can see them in your backs of your pews or in the hymnal. We voted by 80% to 20% to amend Article 2, which had those principles and purposes in it. And now we have the values that we stand for. And it is in the book. Oh, it is in the back. If you look at the, I was hoping we did that, and I know I forgot to do it, but yes, I'm talking about this stuff on the back. Interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, and at the center is love. And that word love is a result of our roots in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And putting that love in the center is an important focus for us as we navigate a world where it's so much easier to make people dislike, fear, and hate one another. So you can get more clicks and subscriptions based on how strident you are. Instead of doing the difficult work of trying to understand and listen look for actual causes of grievances instead of whatever they say this grievance must be about. That doesn't mean we don't push back. When we see things that are obviously wrong, denial of climate change, the growing inequality of wealth throughout the world, a country where a 14-year-old boy can bring a semi-automatic rifle to school and kill 4 people. There comes a point when you can't be agreeable and understanding anymore. And that's where we're at. I know you are. Can you win an election but lose your soul? Even if many of our fellow citizens are headed in that direction, we should not follow them. You know, about 2,000 years ago, Jewish zealots in Judea, which was occupied by the Roman Empire, they were looking for a Messiah who would take up arms and lead them in a war against Rome. And contrary to their hopes and dreams, Rabbi Jesus preached love and to turn the other cheek. Now, he wound up being tortured to death for that. The crucifixion was not the tale of a winner who came out on top. And the way the Christian theology evolved in the 1st and 2nd centuries to deal with that was to posit there are worse things than not winning in this world, as this world sees winning. Let me go back to people knocking on your door. The tactics of converting people. Now, we're not known for proselytizing. We don't go around knocking on doors, handing out, this thing on the back of the hymnal, or back of the order of service. But, like it or not, we are in a marketplace of ideas. Our congregations, ministers, lay readers are, to use a modern term, influencers. With our YouTube channels, our magazines, our leaders who write to newspapers, we are content creators. Thank you, man, who is now creating this sermon on YouTube, I hope. We're trying to convince people to share a positive vision of the world with peace, justice, and widely held prosperity. And we're trying to use the tools of the modern era, like headset mics, to be more effective at sharing this vision. This country is in a close political race between 2 concepts of the future that are so opposite from one another that many of us think, why is this a close race? Well, that's the question to answer. Why is this close race? What underlying causes make people follow a demagogue, even when he betrays the core principles of a religion that they adhere to? What desperation about life is so deep and troubling that some Americans from both sides say they're going to leave the country if the other guy or gal wins? I'm no Pollyanna. I know how upset we are at the choices in front of us, and there's some really dark roads that this country could go through in the next few years. But I'm 70. I lived through the 60s, like many of you. It was worse then. We just don't remember how it felt at the time. Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, George Wallace, Kent State, the weekly body toll coming out of Vietnam, all of this with the background of any minute a nuclear war could break out between the Soviet Union and the United States. Now, we managed to come out the other side of that, and we can again. A few weeks ago, Barack Obama made a speech with a lot of elements that were more like a sermon, because he's a good, actually, I'm going to quote him, I'm going to give you a little snippet of a speech by a lay Congregationalist speaker who you might know. And I think this is important because he is really speaking here as it's really much more like a sermon. And he says it better than I did.
I know these ideas can feel pretty naive right now. We live in a time of such confusion and rancor, with a culture that puts a premium on things that don't last. Money, fame, status, likes. We chase the approval of strangers on our phones. We build all manner of walls and fences around ourselves, and then we wonder why we feel so alone. We don't trust each other as much because we don't take the time to know each other. And in that space between us, politicians and algorithms teach us to caricature each other and troll each other and fear each other. But here's the good news, Chicago. All across America, in big cities and small towns, away from all the noise, the ties that bind us together are still there. We still coach Little League and look out for our elderly neighbors. We still feed the hungry in churches and mosques and synagogues and temples. We share the same pride when our Olympic athletes compete for the gold. Because the vast majority of us do not want to live in a country that's bitter and divided. We want something better. We want to be better.
You know, we talk about multiculturalism and building a diverse society in a democracy. This has never been really done to this extent in history before. A few port cities maybe had this kind of diversity and democracy, but not. And it's understandable as we go through building this multicultural society that people will, have problems adjusting. I confess that as I get older, I'm actually having a problem understanding English accents the way I used to. So when I'm watching Masterpiece Theater, I have to turn on the subtitles. So some of those misgivings are legitimate, and we have to understand each other. And that Jim's hymn, Gather the Spirit, contains the line, gather in hope, compassion, and strength. This is our ingathering time of year where we come back together after summer off, but that line struck me. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Our strength doesn't come from refusing to change our minds if new information is presented to us. Our strength doesn't come from being a bully or disparaging the humanity of other people we disagree with. Our strength comes from our willingness to understand others, to value them, their inherent worth and dignity. And our strength comes in gathering, not acting as a divided bunch of individuals squabbling over details of words and phrases and policy positions, but a group of people like this who have come together voluntarily, despite our differences. Unitarians have lots of differences, actually. Just come to a board meeting sometime. To support a community that we can all believe in, more or less. Now, between now and Inauguration Day next January, we're going to face some challenges. But we are here to help each other, share our hope, compassion, and strength. And even if things don't go the way we hope, you have sanctuary in this house of worship. What does it profiteth a society if it wins an election but loses its soul?
The blessing of truth be upon us. The power of love direct us and sustain us. And may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in, from this time forth until we meet again. Go in peace, create peace, be peace. Thank you.